All right, let's talk about keying tools. So we focused in this course predominantly on key light with a bit of the extract tool when we're just doing a one channel key, often a luminance key, but that could also be on any of the individual color channels. In this little bonus lesson, we have an opportunity to explore a bit further what you can do with those two tools. And then I'm going to get into some third-party tools that are alternatives, predominantly to key light, although they overlap with both of them, both the third-party tools I'm going to talk about. So the other tool that is really famous in the industry is Primatte. And Primatte, it's available not only on After Effects, but if you're working in Nuke, you could be using Primatte. In the highest end situations, you probably would expect to have access to both. And it's partly because they have different strengths, and it's partly that different artists gravitate toward one or the other. So if you think about key light, you're doing almost everything with numbers in key light. You're making your initial selection, but then after that, you're just adjusting a lot of sliders. Primatte is quite a bit different. There's almost no numerical control of the main parts of the effect. I used to describe it as kind of Zen, the way you kind of get in and you just learn to do as little as possible, really, to make your key. But rather than talk about it, I look forward to showing it to you in a few minutes. And also, I'm going to show you another third-party tool that is relatively newer. Those other two go back a couple decades, but Composite Brush, which can be found on AE Scripts, is really pretty remarkable for a low end, at least in terms of price, tool. Like a lot of the tools you see out there where it's pretty much the work of a single developer, the UI isn't as polished or intuitive even as some of the other tools. But having said that, I mean, key light and Primatte, Primatte's a bit more intuitive, we'll see that, but there's still some specialized knowledge involved. So it's not really actually difficult to learn, and like Primatte, Composite Brush seems to have the ability to take on a lot of different selection situations. So it's not just used for color keying. You could also use it to select secondary colors in a design sense. Let's say you wanted to take something that was a certain color and make it pop and make it really more saturated and brighter. It's a really good tool for that. I'll show you a little bit about these tools, and then if you're curious about them, I encourage you to investigate further. Both the third-party tools have some form of demo available, so you'll get a crisscross across the frame, but it will allow you to assess whether they do what you want. And there are pretty good tutorials online for each of them that will let you get in and get pretty proficient after not too much actual training. Let's take a look. Before we get into looking at some of the third-party options for keying, let's revisit a couple of cases in this course where there was more to say about keying, but we weren't ready yet because we were still working on roto. So you may remember this shot, and at the very end, what I came up against was how to isolate these hands. And here is where they are isolated, and I explained that I used key light to pull a red key. Let's just take a look. So all of the effects are in this layer, which is then applied as a matte to the other layer. And I'm just gonna go through that and you'll understand why I did it that way. Starting with key light. And I'll turn these off. So the Uber key shows what was adjusted here. Notice the lipstick color of my key. That is based on his skin. And yeah, it doesn't look like much now, but let's just turn on and solo that mask layer. So this is what I got. I keyed out the hands, and I had carefully isolated where I needed this to go. So this is actually the shape of that slot machine that's here, and that's where I need the hands to be filled in. So that's a big part, right, is just so carefully masking that you don't end up working on extra, because there's a lot of stuff that came along that would have shot this down, but as it happened, and what triggered this was there are red hands, and the other things around here are green and blue. Now, for the context of this bonus lesson, this is the most important thing to know about key light, because it really only works with the digital primary colors, red, green, and blue. It could work with blue with a lot of green in it, green with a lot of blue in it. I don't know what would happen with purple. In general, you rarely use it for red because red is flesh tone. And this was just a strange case where my starting point was to go, okay, I just want to isolate the hands. So once I'd done that, and this is a very crude matte, there's only a difference of 30 between clip black and clip white here, so it's real chewy, crunchy. Then what I did was use Simple Choker to choke it inward, to get rid of some of the noise around it. It helped to actually look at the alpha channel. So that cleans up the alpha channel. And of course it cuts in on the selection. So then, oldest trick in the book, I applied it again in the inverse direction, and spreading the mask further filled in holes that were in the interior. See that? So that's cool. I then added a shift channels effect, and let's get out of alpha channel view and go back to RGB. This just moved the alpha channel into the RGB channels, because the next thing I wanted to do was invert this and then apply it as a Luma matte after just putting a fast box blur on there to just crudely but effectively soften those edges. Now, I didn't have to convert the alpha to RGB and work this way. It just was intuitive to me to do it that way at the time. And so that's why it ended up like this. So I just turned this off, and there we are. Next, we're gonna revisit this roto. This was my final. And early on, remember I tried some extract on here, just using the luminance channel. And I found that overall, on the upper parts of the body, it was just cutting in a lot and eroding areas of the skin that were highlighted. However, what I didn't show you was, had I gone to blue instead, then a lot of the mask edge would be more consistent. And now that you've done some of this type of work, you can see where you could soften and refine and use matte tools to potentially reduce that down. The key thing being just that it's consistent, so it wouldn't be super kludgy to do it. Overall, roto is used in high-level professional situations because it's reliable. Once you have a good roto, it's adjustable and it's solid. This is an unusual case. If you've forgotten, she was on white, and when I looked at the color channels, the blue does have some really good contrast overall between all parts of the foreground and that. And that's pretty rare that it works out like that. You've seen me now work pretty extensively with key light, and professionally, whether it's on After Effects or Nuke, the main alternative to key light is Primatte. And Primatte is available from Red Giant as part of their VFX suite. So if you remember, here's where I got to with this matte. So keeping this result in mind, let's now see what's possible with Primatte. Now, Primatte has some very different paradigms than key light. One that you may really like is at the top is this blue button where it's going to go and actually try to automatically just key the whole thing for me. Now, if I Uber key there aren't any settings. So one thing to know in general about Primatte is it's a process of making selections with basically eyedropper tools, or you can use masks instead. And those don't get saved as properties. They just get saved in your overall key. So there is not much of an undo path with this plugin. Here is the result that it got, and that's not bad, right? The background is not pure black. There is some noise in the foreground, but, you know, a lot of wispy hair and stuff too. So I do get an undo for that, and I'm using it. And now I'm going to take you through the basic way I would key this with Primatte. So selected first is this select background tool. There are these nice big icons and these descriptions right here, so you don't get lost. You can select with an eyedropper, a pointer, or you can select with an area. So the way you go with the eyedropper is different than Primatte. You hold down your mouse to select an entire area. And when you let up, that is your selection. Now she looks really weird, but that's because she's mostly matted out. I didn't really get everything with that. So with that still selected, I can try again. So for example, let's try over here. This isn't going to add to the selection already made. It's going to replace it. That's what I was sort of getting at. So you have to make a contiguous selection. When you let up your mouse, the selection is made. And there are other ways to add to it, but this isn't how that's done. So nothing is really getting the background perfectly black, but that's okay. The main thing I'm seeing now is there's just a lot of background in the foreground. So I'm going to skip over to the clean foreground tool here. So this is the equivalent of clip white, where we are pushing the white closer to the black. Obviously we don't want matte holes over here, so let's add that. Ooh, yeah, that's looking really good. There is a matte hole in the back of the seat. Each time I add to this, notice it is going to have an effect on the background and the edges. So this is like bringing down clip white. And the only way you know, because you don't have numbers, is just to go look. So that still looks fine as far as the edge goes, nice wispies. But now we need to work on the background the same way. I'll just brush down here. Now these decisions do compile and compound with one another. And the wispies are retained, and man, that's a pretty good looking matte, right? I see a little line here. One thing with Primatte is if it turns out there's a big cost to your edge by adding to a selection, the only way to know is to zoom in and go undo, redo. And that didn't. That particular change was fine. But by saying that, it makes it sound like there's some big limitation. In fact, it's just the model of Primatte that is a bit different. So rather than having lots of properties that you can continue to adjust, this tool does force you to commit, but it's got more workarounds to help you with that. I'm not going to go too much into these, but one I will point out is that you can actually create a core matte. There's a little checkbox here. And if I turn that on, you'll see things firm up in the foreground. And these controls are undoable and changeable. So once you get the hang of this, you start to kind of get a feel for what changes you want to make that are basically going to be indelible to where you don't have to start over. I found that after a day or two of using this tool professionally, kind of like full time, I really had the hang of it and started to really like it. And I put that in the past tense because I don't often find myself in a situation where I can count on being able to just use Primatte equally to Keylight. Because Keylight's in the software, there are many compelling reasons to use it. And as we've seen, it's basically effective. But one other thing that Primatte can do is work with non-primaries. So going back to your favorite example from the course, I'll use the rectangle tool this time to select lots of background. And you can see that we're going to have some success with the upper body here. I'll just keep going. It's taking a lot of rectangle selections to do this, isn't it? Switch back to the other ones. Let's see if it works any better. Okay, so that's a very solid core and a nice edge, and that is something that Keylight would not be able to do. Just for giggles, let's try the other part. You can see it's already getting pretty crunchy. And I'll go back to the other point selector, just clean this up a bit more. And you're gonna see it get even chewier. Those are what you call chewy edges. So the lesson here is not to make Primatte look bad, but rather to show you that simply because you can select anything with this tool doesn't mean you can't also blow it and kind of crush your selection by pushing too hard. In the case of Primatte, it's practice rather than learning to work with sliders that's going to make you better at not getting to this point. Now, just to bring a dark horse into the mix, let's take a look at Composite Brush under the Vrenos category here. This is a plugin that's available at AE Scripts. Let's see what this baby can do. The interface isn't utterly intuitive. It helps to watch a short video. And from watching that, I know that I don't click the color eyedropper here. I just start dragging. And just like that, I have a background matte, and then I hold down my Option key on a Mac and select the foreground. And now I'm going to change the transfer mode to Stencil Alpha, and I just keep working. So let's get some more foreground. Looks good. And the hair looks a little chewy here, but I'm on the hard matte type. So I'm going to switch to hair. Ooh, and now we need a little more cleanup in the background. And we have a lot of green spill, but we have an amazing matte. Let me go back to over the color, which could be, let's go with bright orange. And that's just to let me see what's going on back there. Okay, so from here, in terms of the spill, of course, I could add my handy dandy spill suppressor. And maybe let's try Ultra. And I'd have to get the blonde hair the way I like it. I'm gonna go back to Stencil Alpha here. Well, and just like that, you know, not bad. Not only that, this plugin is pretty agnostic, like Primatte, about what colors it will let you choose. Now, I didn't go too far trying to finish this shot with this method, but let's just see what it can do here. We're still not going to try to do everything in one pass, but for the upper, I can clear out the background, and these clouds seem very stubbornly to want to stay there. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'll fill in a bit of foreground, kind of like that. And now let's just go to a medium matte instead of a hard one, just to make it a little more forgiving. Medium is somewhere between that hair and the hard matte, from what I understand. And I'll switch this to Replace Alpha. And wow, okay, pretty good. Let's look at it over the checkerboard. So those clouds that were stubbornly there really aren't even showing up here, and there's some issues. Let's try the pants. So I'm just option dragging on the pants to get them there. You can see that the water wants to look kind of chunky there in the background. We may not get too awesome a matte here. It's still looking kind of rough, but it's fairly consistent. And this thing doesn't object to however many selections I want to make. It will harden things up when I do that. But there's another workaround, which
is just the high level here. I can soften the matte with some of the controls here. So I can lower the high level to allow more kind of subtlety in that background selection, and then I can blur the matte slightly from here. Just like a 0.5 of blurring is often all you want. So anyway, I think you start to get the idea that this one, like Primatte, is pretty agnostic about whether it's more of a luma key or more of a color key. And keep in mind that I'm showing you this really never having used this before. These are my first takes at using this one.
Now, at the end of the day, it's not really about the tools. And when I've only had key light to use, I can get a result with it. And in this course, I've shown you in pretty good depth how I'm able to get there to allow you to do the same. That said, I have been in situations where I just really like using Primatte, and if it's available, I might make use of it. And again, for situations where you don't actually have a proper blue or green background and you're trying to work with something else, especially like a white one, it's pretty powerful. Now, composite brush is a total newcomer, and I literally picked it up to show it to you guys. So I'm intrigued and I'm going to be using it more. And as I mentioned, you can get hands-on with these, so I encourage you to check them out.